When Professor Sigmund Freud in Vienna first began charting the terrain of neuroses, he made a claim that scandalized his era. Many symptoms we grouped under hysteria and nervous disorders stemmed from unfulfilled wishes, mostly unconscious, often sexual, unknown even to the patient. Few imagined how deeply that idea would reshape our understanding of human life. The scope quickly widened. What started as a theory about particular illnesses became a lens for human conduct as a whole. It offered explanations for behavior that once seemed random, and it cast new light on the mind's creations, myths, rituals, and religion itself. Opposition was immediate and fierce. The more the theory grew, the louder the criticisms. Detractors dismissed it as mystical, metaphysical, even sacrilegious, therefore unscientific. Yet the movement continued to expand, year after year. Confusion only deepened when its leaders diverged. Two distinct schools emerged: Freud in Vienna and Karl Jung in Zurich. Their differences, widely discussed as the Vienna and Zurich schools, fueled debate inside and outside the field. It isn't hard to see why resistance formed. This psychology is demanding. It unsettles beliefs humanity has held for ages. It asks for a special method and a trained eye, someone prepared to take seriously the principle that chance does not rule the psyche, that every gesture and expression carries meaning shaped by inner wishes and conflicts. To say plainly that each person helps determine their own fate is a bold step. Poets and philosophers had ventured the thought, science rarely had. Psychoanalysis advanced it with full awareness of its weight, and promised to defend it with method and evidence. Built case by case through empirical work, Freud's psychology fits Max Müller's insight. Familiarity with scattered facts becomes scientific knowledge when the mind perceives the unity of an underlying system. Psychoanalysis names the technique for reaching down into the hidden depths of the person, to surface the motives behind symptoms and stances, to reveal unconscious tendencies that steer development and shape the relations of a life. The dig beneath awareness has brought up a trove of material so startling, so disruptive to prior values, that anyone unfamiliar with the process is easily provoked to doubt and opposition. At first, psychoanalysis was used only to treat the ill. But once analysts began studying people who were otherwise healthy, it became clear that the unconscious of the well and the sick is remarkably similar. The real difference lies in how individuals respond to life and to the inner clashes between opposing drives. These conflicts, often outside awareness and tied to desires that contradict one's conscious self-image, leave their mark. They surface as opinions and prejudices, as patterns of conduct and small errors, or as definite clinical symptoms. As Jung observed, the healthy person wrestles with the very complexes that can cause the neurotic to break down. In The Neighbor, Harvard's N. Shaler argued that most serious failures of conduct, and many of the burdens borne by people and societies, spring from a poor coupling between our primal animal emotions and the rapidly evolved powers of the human mind. Though he reached this view by a path quite different from psychoanalysis, it crisply states the foundation psychoanalytic work has elaborated, hence my quoting it here. Such claims, presented in a broad survey of human relations, rarely provoke resistance. It is their personal application that inflames opposition and invites denunciation. Rightly practiced, psychoanalysis is comparable to surgery. Each stands to its domain, the personality for psychoanalysis, the body for surgery, in much the same way, and both aim at parallel results. Ultimately, nature is the healer. Yet before asepsis and modern operative technique, nature's healing often produced crude outcomes, disfiguring scars, twisted and crippled limbs, impaired function, or at times death when the injury overwhelmed unaided processes. So too in the psyche, without disciplined method, what healing occurs may be partial, distorted, or fail altogether. For centuries, science has studied nature to learn how to help her heal with the least damage. The triumphs of surgery are proof of how far that effort has gone. Meanwhile, the wounds of the inner life were largely ignored by science. The conflicts that stalled a person's growth and even produced physical pain were handed off to religion and metaphysics. Psychoanalysis entered to offer the personality what surgery offers the body, a way to heal. It doesn't always succeed, nor should we expect it to, because the work demands a great deal from the patient. Real progress asks for character, intelligence, and the courage to face one's stripped-down self. Anything less than absolute honesty turns back on the seeker and defeats the goal. This is not light work. Without a strong push, illness, crisis, or a situation too hard to bear, most people need real bravery to step into it. To understand this psychology, which has seeped into many areas of thought and aspires to guide practical life, we need to look at how it developed and where it stands now. In its new direction lie both its greatest promise and its greatest risk. The story begins in 1895 with studies on hysteria, the joint work of Dr. Josef Breuer of Vienna and his pupil, Dr. Sigmund Freud. Their findings suggested that hysterical symptoms grew from emotionally charged memories. These memories, unknown to the waking mind, found expression through symptoms. Though forgotten, they could be recovered, and their emotional charge released. Hypnosis was the tool that let physicians reach those buried scenes. It showed that the memories weren't lost, only pushed out of awareness, and could return when properly prompted. Strikingly, when the memories resurfaced along with the pain attached to them, the symptoms faded. The conclusion followed. Symptoms depend on unspent emotion, on psychic trauma that never found its full expression. Healing requires reconnecting the memory with its rightful feeling and letting that emotion run its course through a faithful reliving of the forgotten event. Freud eventually realized he didn't need hypnosis to bring back forgotten experiences. The same emotional material could surface in a normal waking state. He asked patients to relax, drop their inner critic, and let thoughts flow, say whatever came to mind, without filtering. Guided by simple associations, the conversation would circle toward the most charged, disturbing memories. Avoiding them proved impossible. The feelings around those ideas were too strong. Jung called these clusters of memories and emotions a complex. Touch a complex, and trouble begins. The feelings are so painful or unacceptable that the mind pushes them out of awareness. Patients would stall, go blank, twist connections, or insist there was nothing more to say. This is repression, the mind's everyday way of shielding us from shame, grief, ego wounds, and the clash between our ideals and our weaknesses. Once hypnosis was set aside, the real challenge became how to help those memories return. Freud noticed another active force at work, not just hiding the memories but blocking their return. He called it resistance. Resistance shows up in many costumes: clever arguments, sharp criticism of the analyst or the method, or a complete shutdown of speech. Until that resistance loosens, the stream of thought dries up, and the analysis can't move forward. The problem, at first, was simple to state and hard to solve. People resisted. Their minds kept certain memories and feelings locked away. So the task became finding a way to loosen those defenses so the buried material could rise, be voiced, and finally released. Again and again it proved true. Even when someone swore they had nothing hidden, the right conditions could bring those emotions into daylight. Freud gave that hidden territory a working name: the unconscious. Not a grand theory, just a label for everything a person isn't aware of in a given moment, the not conscious. To say a thought is unconscious simply means the individual doesn't know it's there right now. As these investigations deepened, especially in cases of hysteria, paths led repeatedly into the erotic life and often back to very early years. This challenged the common belief that sexuality suddenly appears at puberty. Evidence showed a distinct, instinctive kind of sexuality in very young children, subtle but powerful enough to shape later life. At first, this pointed to a single cause: an infantile sexual trauma driving the neurosis. But when researchers looked at people without clinical symptoms, they found just as many early psychic and sexual shocks. The theory shifted. Instead of one decisive trauma, the focus moved to the infantilism of sexuality itself, the way early sexual life exists and develops in childhood. Another twist emerged. Many supposed childhood traumas turned out not to be literal events at all, but fantasies, defenses against the memory of a child's own exploratory behavior. That realization prompted a closer study of what children actually experience and express. Freud gathered those insights in 3 contributions to the sexual theory. He observed wide variations in how children show sexual impulses, far different from adult sexuality, yet normal as an unconscious expression of a growing life. And while these early patterns don't mirror adulthood, they leave clear traces. They influence, they shape, and they matter. Freud noticed that children show many small, scattered expressions of instinct. He called these early impulses polymorphous perverse, not to scandalize childhood, but to mark how, in miniature, they can resemble the adult patterns we label perversions under certain conditions. As his research went on, Freud revised his view. Neurotic symptoms were not simply the fallout of specific sexual events. They grew from how a person reacted to their own instinctual makeup, and from the kind of repression those instincts met. Here a major confusion begins, the word sexuality. In everyday speech it sounds narrow and physical. For Freud, it was broad, almost a synonym for love. He meant the whole range of tender feelings and bonds that start in a primitive erotic source, even when their original aim has been replaced by something else. He also insisted on the psychic side of sexuality, not just the bodily expressions. Keep that wider meaning in mind. Without it, his theory is easy to misread. Freud's careful look into inner life also highlighted the power of fantasy making. Daydreams and private stories are nearly universal, in children and in adults. Entire lives can be half-lived inside imagined worlds where forbidden or impossible wishes are quietly fulfilled when reality refuses them. Much of this fantasy activity barely reaches awareness. It rises from unrecognized wishes and strivings, showing itself through veiled symbols and strange constructions we don't fully understand. Most of us know the experience. Odd thoughts or images push in, and we have to will them away. Old, half-forgotten impressions from childhood can return in fantastical shapes, and we dwell on them as if they still mattered now. These strange products of the mind gave early explorers of the soul a rich field to study. By following the chain of associations back to their source, it became clear that they were not random or foolish at all. They were shaped by a definite process and sprang from specific wishes and desires that hid themselves in images and scenes. Because a dream is the most deeply unconscious creation we have, Freud shifted his focus from waking fantasies and daydreams to the nightly dreams of his patients. He wanted to see whether dreams might reveal the painful feelings and ideas that had been pushed out of awareness and could not be spoken outright. The insight paid off. Far from being a jumble of nonsense, dreams are packed with meaning. Most often, they circle around the problem that is most urgent in a person's life at that moment. They do not speak plainly. They speak in symbols, so their message slips past our guard. In this way, the dream lets an unrealized wish find expression and a kind of satisfaction. This understanding of dream and fantasy as symbolic grew from the method of association and from the careful study of many people's dreams. Investigators noticed that certain images and motifs kept returning across different dreamers. These recurring elements were consistently tied to particular, often unrecognized wishes and conflicts. When direct expression was blocked, the mind reached for the same symbols to carry the meaning. Over time, some dream figures and phrases came to be recognized, in a general sense, as signs of particular repressed feelings and ideas, shortcuts to what hides below the surface. A parallel pattern appears in our shared stories. Comparative study showed that myths and fairy tales are built with a similar symbolic machinery. The kinship is so close that Karl could say, "Myth is a fragment of the race's infantile soul life, and the dream is the myth of the individual." When a patient shares a dream, he offers a key, an open door into the unconscious and the clusters of conflict that sit behind his symptoms. But dreams aren't the only clues. Mannerisms and small, unplanned acts. The first words spoken to the analyst. Sudden surges of emotion at certain ideas. In truth, a person's whole way of speaking and moving becomes a map of inner life and hidden trouble. As this work unfolds, a pattern emerges. The roots are emotional. Not only in full-blown nervous illness, but in the stray symptoms, the quirks, the oddities we all carry. The real source of disturbance is less about ignorance and more about the inner resistances that keep us from seeing. So the task of therapy is not just to inform the patient. It is to find those resistances, bring them to light, and gently but firmly work through them. This is delicate terrain. The material is complex, and the method must use every helpful influence available. One influence is decisive, the relationship itself. Trust and personal regard make treatment more effective. Psychoanalysis names this forced transference, the specific bond that forms in the patient toward the analyst. Through this bond we can reach the unconscious, meet the organized defenses, and help the fragile, sensitive self accept new ways of valuing and understanding. Freud's focus on the sexual instinct in neurosis, and in shaping the normal personality, does not deny other motives, the push to survive, the claims of the ego. It's simply that sexuality is more often tabooed, pressed down, and therefore exerts a stronger, more disruptive power. You can see its weight in culture. From the beginning of recorded time, art, poetry, and story have put love at the center. Given that centrality, it should not surprise us that trouble in this field can echo through a life. The sexual drive is often likened to hunger, an elemental need in all of us. Freud called this deep craving, this seeking energy, the libido,